Hey everybody, it's Buzz. Today I want to talk about some Junji manga. I own most of the ones that have been released in English, and I read all of the ones I have here. I just kind of want to talk about these, try and give each series a score and stuff. I think I'll talk about these in the order that I read them. I was trying to think about which order I would want to talk about these in. I think reviewing them in the order that I read them was probably going to be the best thing. So the first Junji manga I ever read was Uzumaki. I read this one about a year ago. When I first started it, I was a little skeptical. I didn't really know what to expect going into it, having never read a Junji manga before. And I was very surprised. I actually liked it a lot. I got incredibly engrossed in this volume. And I actually read the entire thing in one day. So this is a pretty chunky volume. It's about 630 pages, and I read it all in one day. Which I think goes to show, how much I got engrossed in this book when I first started it. Uzumaki starts off a little bit repetitive. It's almost an anthology of sorts. A lot of scary things start happening with spirals, and the curse of the spirals around the town gets worse and worse. And I've heard some people say they got bored of this series. It felt a little bit repetitive. I felt that a little bit at first, but the more I got into the lore of this series and the more I learned about what the curse was, the more and more I got interested in this series, and I got more invested. So Uzumaki is a story of a town which is getting infected, I guess you could say, with a curse of spirals. People start looking into spirals and going insane. People start trying to make spirals because they're obsessed with them. And it eventually gets out of hand and starts turning people. People's bodies start turning into spirals, and more people are going insane and stuff like that in the town. And yeah, it's pretty interesting how deep the lore goes in Uzumaki. It gets pretty crazy, and honestly, I liked it a lot. It wasn't as repetitive as some of Junji Ito's other mangas, because again, I got more and more genuinely invested in what was going on with the town and the curse. A little bit hard, that one. I'm a genuinely big fan of Uzumaki, and I would give this a 9 out of 10. Next one I read was an anthology, actually. Fragments of Horror is an anthology of short stories all about horror or just scary things in general. Most of the stories in this are just one chapter. Some of them are better than others. There's some ones in here that are kind of weak, not that scary. And there are some chapters in this one that I genuinely found interesting and actually kind of scared me a little bit. My favorite story from this one is the one about the bird woman who finds people in the woods, who tracks down people in the woods who are injured and starts feeding them mouth to mouth, which sounds just kind of weird, oh, that's kind of weird. Yeah, there's actually some pretty interesting backstory with this story, and the implications of some of the happenings are actually quite disturbing. I found it very interesting. And also, one of my other Junji Ito favorites is the story of the girl who can't think for herself. And so she gets a caretaker who tells her what to do all the time for every decision she needs to make. And they're inseparable. Again, that's another story that starts off pretty simple enough, but once you start to learn more and more about what's happening, it gets pretty spooky. It gets pretty interesting. And again, a lot of these ones I'm talking about on, a pretty surface level to avoid spoilers. If I just went ahead and gave you guys the ending of these stories to be more accurate, I would be spoiling it. So the next one I read was Gyou. This is another long-form story, which is multiple volumes. And this one, a lot of people actually know about this one from just memes and stuff. But this is the one where sea creatures get mechanical legs and leave the oceans to track down people and kill them. This is the one with the giant shark with bug legs. There's also, where is it? There's also the fish with legs that swarm, and it kind of goes for a gross factor in this one. It's less scary and more just kind of creepy crawly and nasty. This one definitely targets the phobias. And this story starts off pretty nice. I actually liked it a lot at first when it was all about the sea creatures growing legs. I thought that was pretty interesting, pretty scary. It kind of goes off the deep end a little bit. with the gas storyline, and you start to learn about like the gas-powered mechanisms and like the poison and stuff like that, which starts infecting people. You know, I think it goes off the deep end a little bit, and I kind of lost interest once it strayed away from sea creatures and got more into people being infected, getting taken over by the mechanical legs. I started to lose interest a little bit, I'm gonna be honest. I still thought most of this book was pretty interesting, but in general, you know, it kind of lost me a little bit. I started to lose interest by the end of that story. It definitely didn't keep me interested as much as Uzumaki did. Now, the nice thing about this Gyou hardcover is that it has the ever-famous The Enigma of Amagara Fault. This is probably the most internet-famous Junji Ito work. This is the one where holes shaped exactly like people start appearing in mountains, and people are drawn to them, and they're like, this is the hole for me! I need to go in it to see what's on the other side! And then people get stuck, and it's like this story is one that definitely targets claustrophobia. This is also another favorite of mine. I like this story a lot. Amagara Fault is definitely a classic, and I'm glad that it was included as a bonus chapter. It's too small to get its own book, you know, it's only like 40, 50 pages, something like that. It wouldn't have gotten its own manga volume anyway, so I'm glad that they included it in a really nice, you know, hardcover copy, and they didn't cheap out on that one at all. You know, it's fun that it got a premium book to be in, since it is a classic. Now, Gyou, I'm not the biggest fan of Gyou, I'll be honest. It's pretty decent. I would probably give it a 7 out of 10. The bonus chapters that this one includes, though, are really good, and are both 9 out of 10s for me. The next one that I have is Shiver. Shiver is another anthology. This is a short story collection. Has a lot of individual chapters, and has a couple multi-chapter continuing stories in here as well. There weren't that many stories in Shiver that I actually thought were very interesting. The one about the cursed record people always want to kill over to own and listen to, that one was pretty interesting. But besides that, there weren't too many stories in book that I thought were very standout. You know, a lot of really okay 6 and 7 out of 10 short stories in here. Of course, the one with the balloon head nooses. I mean, I really like that one. That one's pretty scary. I thought that one was pretty interesting. All in all, this is also a pretty basic set. There's only really 2 other short stories in here that I thought were really interesting. The one where people are dreaming and time flows shorter in their brains than in real life, and it feels like they're dreaming for years. That one was pretty interesting. I like that one a lot. And also the story of people being addicted to drinking oil and like affecting their bodies in crazy ways. That one was pretty fun too. All in all, I'm not the biggest fan of Shiver, but because of the good stories in here, the ones that I do like, I will give it an 8 out of 10. I will be pretty generous because there are some ones that I'm a big fan of in here. Even though there are some stories that I wasn't the biggest fan of. Shiver's got some good stuff, definitely. So the next one I read, Smashed. This is another short story collection. This is an anthology. I would say to my tastes, this one is an improvement on Shiver. Smashed definitely has some good stories here as well. Among my favorites here are the one about the bats, the one about the ghost flash floods. That is another Junji Ito classic. I'm a really big fan of that one. And then, of course, Smashed, the one about people that randomly get smashed by an invisible object and they don't know what's going on. That's pretty spooky because it is pretty vague about why people are randomly dying, and, you know, it's scary, you know? The idea of people just, like, spontaneously getting smashed, you know, that's just kind of a scary concept. And it's executed pretty well. There are some stories in here that I'm not that big of a fan of. For instance, the one about the nail teeth kid. That is a reoccurring character in a lot of Junji Ito's anthologies. And I'm not the biggest fan of that one. It's pretty basic, pretty boring. Also, another classic I really like is the one about the guy that is obsessed with his book collection and is obsessed with having every single book memorized at all times, and he loses his mind wondering if he's maybe missed a book. That one was pretty scary. As someone who, is kind of a book collector, that kind of pulled at the mind strings a little bit. Pretty basic set here. Some good stories, a couple of stinkers in there, but I don't really mind, even if some of the short stories are kind of hit or miss for me. There are some good ones in here. And honestly, even just for the flash flood story alone, I'd probably give this an 8 out of 10. Because the thing with some of these sets is maybe there's like one story which I really, really like and I give a 9 out of 10. And then there's some 6 out of 10s and some 7 out of 10s in here. Honestly, with Junji Ito, if something is really striking to me, it's really, really striking, and I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time. It's going to have a lot of like an emotional impact to me. And so for these, I rate very emotionally because, for some of these stories, I get kind of obsessed with them and I think about them for a long time. And so as, a short story collection, if there's 2 stories in here which I think are very excellent, then it's worth it to me to read that. Next up, we got Tomie. Tomie is the story of a girl who is immortal, and if a part gets cut off of her, it grows itself an entirely new body, and she can control men and basically make them do anything for her. She can basically mind control men, and they also have a tendency to murder people, and people are filled with murderous rage whenever they're around her, so they tend to attack other people or try and attack her if they fall in love with her. It's a very interesting story, but the thing with this series, Tomie is very, very repetitive. It's a thick book, and I'm gonna be honest, not that much happens. It kind of feels like I'm reading the exact same chapter over and over in here. Tomie gets a guy, the guy goes crazy because of her powers, tries to kill her, her powers kick in and she's immortal and she can't be killed, and a bunch of dudes that die, she moves on, the end. And that is what happens throughout pretty much all of this book. There's very little character development at all with Tomie, and very little happens that actually has any sort of emotional weight to it. It's kind of just shock value. Ooh, a bunch of people died, ooh, and then it moves on. And so Tomie is actually kind of a weaker series for me. Now this is actually Junji Ito's first ever work. His manga debut was Tomie, so, makes sense that there would be some weaker stuff in here because, he doesn't have the experience he did for some of these later books. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of Tomie, it has a really good ending. The final arc in this is actually multiple chapters long. It's not just a one chapter. It's about a man who got wronged by Tomie, survived, and has been trying to track her down and kill Tomie once and for all and find a way to kill her completely. And, the ending arc to Tomie is pretty interesting. It's definitely the best few chapters of the whole series for me. And even though the whole series was pretty repetitive and I wasn't all that interested in it, the ending redeems it a lot. I would give Tomie as a final score a 7.5 out of 10. Alright, now we're down to the last 2 that I own. Now, next one I read, Romina. This is about a planet called Romina, which is alive, and it's flying towards Earth through space. And it's dead set on destroying the Earth. And there's also a girl who is the daughter of the man who discovered the planet Romina. Her name is Romina, the planet was named after her. And everybody has this conspiracy theory that if they kill her, the planet will go away and they'll stop trying to destroy Earth. Pretty interesting series. People losing their minds at the end of the world here. Honestly, I like this series a lot. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's only about 200 pages, and it's from start to finish, it's really interesting. I read this whole thing in one day, so it's not like a big read or anything. The planet being alive is classic Junji Ito spooky stuff, unstoppable horror, from start to finish, this is a pretty interesting story. There's actually a couple of really good characters in this series. This has a very clear good guy and bad guy dynamic for this story. And it works quite... Honestly, this is one of my more favorite longer form Junji Ito stories. I loved this one a lot. This is actually extremely good. I would probably give this a 9 out of 10. I actually really, really liked this. Romina is super good. Now we have the final one. I got Censor. Censor is about hair. that gives people psychic powers and wisdom when they stick it to their heads. The nice thing about Censor is that it gives you the backstory about the mysterious hair, and a recurring character girl who has that hair. And Censor is almost a short story anthology with reoccurring themes, so it's pretty interesting. The main protagonist, Miss Byakuya, goes around trying to learn about herself and what's going on with her magical hair, and gets into lots of spooky hijinks with disturbing happenings, such as the suicide bugs. There's a cult that is chasing her, who wants her powers for evil deeds. And there's also a side character who is a reporter who is trying to learn about the magic hair, and Miss Byakuya, who also has stalkers who are in the cult as well. And it's a very interesting story with lots of interwoven story arcs. For being as short as it is, this is also just a one volume. It's about 200 pages. There's a lot here for 200 pages, honestly. I really liked this story as well. This is another really strong, full volume story. Again, you know, this is another extremely solid but not perfect story. This is another, I would say 9 out of 10. I liked this one a lot. Censor? Honestly, I would say Censor is one of the better Junji Ito mangas. I actually liked it a lot, which is a little strange. When you see that it doesn't even get good reviews on Mail. Like on Mail, it has like a 6.5 out of 10. I don't understand. I loved this one. It was great. Anyways, I think that's everything. Is that everything? Hold on, did I miss any? So I know that there are a few more that I missed. I know there's like Disappearing Classroom, Frankenstein, Cat Diaries. Is that it? Maybe in the future I'll do a sequel to this with more Junji Ito manga. I'm a big fan of Junji Ito. I'm gonna read and buy more of his work. I'm probably gonna be pre-ordering pretty much everything that comes out from Junji Ito. It's great. Viz has done a wonderful job with all of these hardcover editions of his stories. Really, really nice, high quality. Viz is really nailing down these hardcovers. You know, a lot of these are not like too heavy that they're hard to hold. The paper quality is really nice of these as well. Viz is really getting it down pat with making these hardcovers that are actually like a really nice book and they're not just showy. Thank you, Viz, for making these. Thank you, Junji Ito. And that's everything. So thanks everybody for watching. And as always, remember to like the video, subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. And also my Discord and all that stuff is in the links in the description below. And yeah, thanks everybody. See ya.